The phone rang just as I was standing on the terrace watering the orchids, exactly 32 days after the wedding that had cost us more than my husband's annual budget for corporate litigation. It was an unknown number, displaying a Massachusetts area code. I almost let it go to voicemail, thinking it was another vendor trying to upsell us on a 6-month anniversary package. I didn't. That one decision, answering that single innocuous call on a Tuesday morning, ripped the peaceful foundation out from under my world and replaced it with something sharp, cold, and utterly terrifying. "Mrs. Thorne, this is Michael Sterling." I was the wedding photographer. The man's voice was low, tight, and laced with a profound, terrifying seriousness that cut through the gentle breeze on the terrace. I gripped the phone tighter, my breath catching in my throat. "Is something wrong with the photos, Michael?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, but it cracked. I heard myself sounding like a brittle old woman. "It's not the photos, Mrs. Thorne. It's what's in them," he insisted, his voice dropping further, as if he feared the very air was listening. I just finished the final retouching pass on the reception gallery, and I noticed a meeting. A very disturbing, very specific meeting. I can't explain it over the phone. I need Mr. Thorne at my studio downtown in 1 hour. Please, this can't wait, not another day. I hung up and stood frozen, the watering can heavy in my hand. Arthur was in his study, going over the day's market reports for Thorne Industries. He was a rock, a fortress of calm efficiency, but this felt like something no market analysis could predict. For Michael, an artist obsessed with light and composition, to break professional protocol this aggressively meant something catastrophic had been captured. This wasn't about a bad angle or an unflattering shadow. This was about a secret. A deep, cold, deliberate secret. I walked into Arthur's study and handed him the phone number and the name. I repeated the words exactly as Michael had said them, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Don't say anything to Clara or Julian." Arthur looked at the note, then at my face. He didn't ask what was wrong. After 35 years of marriage, he knew I only looked this terrified when the foundation of our world was shaking. He made a quiet excuse and left the house in silence, leaving me alone in the mausoleum of our beautiful, expensive home. I spent the next hour cleaning the kitchen, not aggressively but obsessively, wiping down surfaces that were already clean, lining up spice jars, trying to impose order on the chaos roaring inside my mind. I kept replaying the entire wedding, the perfect white dress, the antique lace veil, Julian's eyes brimming with what I had assumed was love, the toasts, the dance. Every memory was now being cross-examined by a prosecutor in my mind. Had I missed something? Was that tenderness or triumph? I looked at a half-full crystal vase of wedding roses on the counter, and I felt a physical sickness. When Arthur returned 2 hours later, he didn't storm in. He didn't yell or throw things. He walked in with the silent, heavy step of a man who had just looked into an abyss. He found me standing by the kitchen island, still holding the rag. He put his briefcase on the floor and, without a word, he pulled out an encrypted tablet and laid it on the pristine white marble. The photo was taken from a balcony overlooking the main ballroom. In the foreground, my sister-in-law was laughing loudly, but the focus wasn't on her joy. It was on a quiet corner, near the champagne fountain. There, hidden behind a tall, cascading centerpiece of orchids that I had meticulously chosen, Julian wasn't smiling or dancing with his bride. He was engaged in an intense, hushed conversation, and the man he was speaking to was not a wedding guest. He was Victor Atlas, CEO of Atlas Group, My husband's most ruthless, dedicated corporate rival. Atlas. The name itself was synonymous with corporate piracy. He had spent the last 5 years trying to engineer a hostile takeover of Thorn Industries, threatening everything Arthur had built. He was a venomous snake, a man Arthur hadn't spoken to in over a decade, a man whose presence at my daughter's wedding would have triggered a police intervention. Yet there he was, leaning in, Julian nodding eagerly, a manila folder visibly exchanging hands. I sank onto a stool, staring at the screen. My first coherent thought was not about the company's stock value, but about the dress, the cost of the dress. All that planning, all that emotion, all that love. All of it was just an elaborate stage set for a business transaction. The smile on Julian's face in that photo wasn't for Clara. It was for the man who was paying him. He didn't marry her for love, Eleanor. He married her for access. To me, to the house, to the documents I sometimes leave on the kitchen table. He is an asset. A spy. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was profound. It violated every code of human decency. It made me look at Clara, my beautiful, innocent daughter, and see her as collateral damage. She was not a bride. She was the key to the vault. My husband, the brilliant financier, had been outmaneuvered, not by a better businessman, but by a snake who used my daughter's heart as his weapon. "We have to tell her," I whispered, the words barely escaping my throat. "Arthur, we have to stop this now, before he takes anything else from her." "No," Arthur said firmly, placing his hand over the photo, extinguishing the light. "We do not tell her. If she knows, she will shatter. She will confront him, he will run, and we will lose the leverage we need to permanently destroy Atlas. Julian is merely a costly pawn. Victor Atlas is the king. We have to dismantle the entire kingdom." That was the moment I realized the depth of the lie we had to live. We had to maintain the facade of the proud, happy parents. We had to invite the man who was systematically destroying our family to dinner, to share our lives, to sleep in our guest room. I was no longer a wife and mother. I was a counterintelligence agent in my own home. Arthur left immediately to meet with his old security contact, a man named Elias. I was left alone to greet Julian when he came home. The door opened. "Mom, you look gorgeous. What's for dinner?" he asked, throwing his jacket on the back of a chair. A small, irritating habit that now felt like a declaration of war. He kissed my cheek. I smiled, the muscles in my face protesting the monumental effort. I looked into his eyes and saw not the loving son-in-law I thought I knew, but a cold, transactional emptiness. And I knew then that my revenge would be quiet, maternal, and lethal. The next 72 hours were the longest of my life. My role in Operation Lockstep, as Arthur had chillingly named the covert counter-operation, was simple: observe, maintain normalcy, and enable the trap. Arthur had initiated a deep Black Ops investigation into Julian's entire life. Elias's report confirmed the worst. Julian was $3.5 million in debt from failed ventures and gambling. His venture capital firm was a shell. The only thing keeping him afloat was a series of wire transfers from an Atlas Group financial network. His debt was so deep, he couldn't afford to love Clara. He needed her as a bargaining chip. The final deliverable Atlas wanted was the complete, proprietary code for the Aegis encryption platform, Thorn Industries' crown jewel. The wedding date had been chosen because the company's data center was undergoing a systems migration, leaving a momentary window of vulnerability. Every interaction in my home became agony. Clara was blissfully unaware, planning future trips, discussing remodeling the guest room. I watched her look at Julian, her eyes full of the pure, genuine love he was so expertly exploiting. I would sit next to him at the breakfast table, pouring his coffee, listening to him casually steer the conversation toward Thorn Industries' systems, or subtly inquire about Arthur's private security protocols. Every question he asked was a tiny piece of the wall coming down around our life. I started noticing the details. The way he checked his secondary phone under the dinner table. The way his hands would tremble slightly when Arthur talked about the new security system upgrade. One evening, he insisted on tidying up Arthur's home office. He was inching toward the biometric access key safe hidden in the floor. I had to intercept. I walked in, carrying a tray of tea. "Julian, darling, are you helping Arthur?" I asked, my voice laced with the sweetest suburban calm. "Do be careful of that desk. Arthur just had the alarm system upgraded. It registers all biological signatures in the house now. Even a partial fingerprint near that floor safe triggers an internal alert." I told him it was overkill, but you know your father. I watched him. The micro-expression, the instantaneous pulling back of his hand, the forced, too wide smile, was all the confirmation I needed. That flicker of fear in his eyes was my first, quiet victory. He realized he was no longer operating in the dark. He had an observer, and that observer was me. I spent hours with Arthur learning the technical details of the trap. We had created a ghost server, a perfect duplicate of the Aegis code, but with a logic bomb embedded. This fake code would be meticulously placed on a thumb drive and accidentally left in Arthur's home office. The moment that logic bomb code was run on any external machine, Julian's laptop or Atlas Group's server, it would not only be rendered useless, but would instantly flag the IP address of the recipient, sending an alert directly to Arthur's server farm and the FBI's cybercrimes division. The waiting felt like standing on a landmine. I had to wait for Julian to take the bait, to steal the drive, to run the fake code, and to finalize his contractual agreement with Victor Atlas. Until he committed the final crime, our evidence was only circumstantial. We needed him caught red-handed. The waiting ended with a horrifying realization. Clara came to me, her eyes clouded with worry. "Mom, Julian is acting strange. He's distant. He keeps talking about a huge financial windfall that's about to change our lives. He said we can finally leave the East Coast and start over in Europe. He wants to sell the house next month." The lie was designed to prepare Clara for their escape. He was planning to flee. The moment he ran the Aegis code, he would execute his exit strategy, taking Clara and my proprietary data with him. I realized my window was closing. I had to stop the thief before he stole my daughter. I coordinated the final stages with Arthur. We scheduled a critical board meeting for Thorn Industries for the following Thursday, but it wasn't about the board. It was a decoy. The actual event would be a small, intimate family dinner at my home that same evening, a celebration of Julian and Clara's 1-month anniversary. This was the trap. I orchestrated the lie perfectly. I told Julian I'd insisted Arthur go to a defense conference in D.C. that Thursday, and that Arthur would be taking the biometric key with him. Julian smiled, the predator in him finally sensing the kill. Then, I casually found the ghost server thumb drive while cleaning Arthur's desk and placed it carelessly between a stack of bills on his desk. On Wednesday night, I looked at Julian across the dinner table. He was unnaturally giddy. He drank too much wine, made too many expansive promises about their future in Florence or Paris. He was celebrating his victory a day early. He thought he had won the house, the girl, and the fortune. He didn't realize he was eating his final meal before his complete execution. The day of the sting, Thursday, was the longest day of my life. I had to convince Eleanor and Clara that Arthur was boarding a flight to D.C. He drove to the airport, checked a bag, got his boarding pass, and then, at the last possible moment, claimed an emergency and changed his ticket for the next day. He drove to a secure bunker in the city where Elias and the FBI cyber unit were waiting. My role was to be the dutiful, loving mother. I spent the afternoon preparing Julian's favorite meal, lamb with rosemary, his favorite wine, the perfect cake. I set the table with the china we used only for Christmas. I lit the candles. The house smelled of perfection and poison. At 7 p.m., Clara and Julian sat down for their anniversary dinner. I watched the live feed on a small, hidden screen in my sewing room. The conversation was strained. Julian kept looking at his watch, impatient for the moment he could leave. At 8 p.m., he announced he had an urgent call from a client and retired to the guest bedroom. The moment he was gone, I signaled Clara to help me with the cake. Julian didn't wait. He crept out of the guest room, not toward the back door, but toward Arthur's office, the heart of the vault. I watched him on the small screen. He found the thumb drive instantly. He slipped it into his pocket, his hand visibly shaking. Then he went straight to the floor safe, frantically trying to guess the combination and then desperately trying to use a partial fingerprint scan from a glass he'd handled earlier. He failed. The system registered his frantic attempts and sent a silent coded alert to Arthur. Attempted biometric breach. Subject ID JT. He then went back to the guest room and connected the stolen thumb drive to his high-powered laptop. The moment he plugged it in, the logic bomb code began to run a silent script. 30 miles away, Victor Atlas's lead counsel had just taken a call from Julian confirming the acquisition of the code. Julian sent him the first encrypted package via email containing the dummy Aegis code. The moment Atlas's counsel opened the file, the logic bomb executed. Instead of the encryption platform, the counsel screen went black and a single message flashed in red text. Arthur Thorne sends his regards. You have been compromised. Simultaneously, the real Aegis servers logged the exact time, the IP, and the geolocation of the receiving machine. The FBI was instantly notified. The final evidence was secured. Back at the house, I walked out of the sewing room and gave Elias the final signal. It was time for the curtain to rise. At 9:15 p.m., Arthur walked into the dining room. Clara shrieked in surprise. "Dad, we thought you were in D.C.," she exclaimed, running to hug him. "I had a last-minute change of plans, honey," he said, his eyes hard and fixed on Julian, who was walking back into the dining room, his face pale and sweating. He knew. "Arthur, what a surprise," he stammered, trying to regain his composure. I was just on a call, a huge deal, you know." I stepped forward, my voice calm but laced with a quiet fury that startled even Arthur. "Yes, Julian, we know all about your deals, the ones that happen in the dark corners of wedding receptions." Arthur pulled out his phone and projected Michael Sterling's photograph on the dining room wall, the close-up of Julian handing the manila folder to Victor Atlas. Clara gasped, a low, wounded sound, putting her hand over her mouth. Julian's facade finally shattered. "It's a lie. It's manipulation. He's an old friend." A friend who paid off $3.5 million of gambling debt and demanded the proprietary code for my husband's most sensitive platform in return. I countered, stepping toward him. I played the recorded phone call between him and Atlas's counsel. The voices filled the room detailing the theft, the payment, and the final plan to flee the country with Clara. Clara turned to Julian, tears streaming down her face. "Julian, tell me this isn't real. Tell me you love me." He looked at her, and for a fleeting second I saw something that might have been genuine regret. But it was quickly replaced by panic. He lunged for the back door. It was too late. 2 plainclothes FBI agents and Elias's team stepped out of the kitchen and the living room, blocking the exits. The handcuffs snapped on his wrists with a decisive, chilling click. Julian was led away in silence, his grand cinematic plot reduced to a pathetic televised arrest. The next day, Atlas Group's general counsel was also arrested, and the fake Aegis code had initiated a massive, irreversible data dump into the federal systems, proving the intent to commit corporate theft. The entire operation crumbled in less than 12 hours. Clara was devastated. She was heartbroken, furious, and humiliated. She didn't speak to me for a week. She was locked in her bedroom, mourning a man who never existed. She blamed us for being so suspicious. She blamed us for the surveillance. She blamed us for the marriage. "You saw it, Mom. You knew, and you let me marry him. Why did you wait?" she finally screamed at me in the backyard, destroying the perfect rose bushes I loved so much. "I waited because he had to commit the final crime, Clara," I explained, my own eyes full of tears. "If we had stopped him before he ran the code, he would have walked free with a breach of contract suit against your father. Victor Atlas would have just sent another spy. He would have convinced you we were the villains. I needed him to be caught in flagrante delicto. I needed him charged with a federal crime, ensuring he would never, ever be able to hurt you or this company again. I had to let him think he was winning to ensure he lost everything permanently. I did it for you, my darling." It took months for her to process the truth, but eventually she saw the logic, the cold, harsh logic of survival and protection. The marriage was annulled, and Julian was facing a decade in federal prison. Victor Atlas was ruined. The investigation of his counsel led to a massive SEC and DOJ probe into his company, which collapsed within a year. His reputation and fortune utterly destroyed. My vengeance was not about blood. It was about ensuring the complete, utter, and permanent eradication of the threat. I walk into my office every morning now and look at a small framed photo. It's not of the wedding. It's of Michael Sterling's original grainy shot of Julian and Victor Atlas exchanging the manila folder. It's a permanent reminder that the most dangerous threats are the ones delivered with a smile and a promise of forever. I had lost my peace for a while, but I gained something far more valuable: the assurance that my family is safe and that I am capable of a quiet, protective fury that no man can survive. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and walked onto the terrace. The air was clean. The orchids were thriving. Alone, yes, but free. And for the first time in years, that was exactly what I wanted. I saved my daughter from the ruin of a transactional love, and that, I realized, was the only revenge that truly mattered. Some men choose war. I chose surgery, and the patient never knew the knife was coming until the damage was irreversible and the tumor was gone.